So I'm hopping on about a minute early just because I want people's notifications to start coming through, letting them know that I am going on live here on Mormon Book Reviews. I'm your host, Stephen Peinecker. We're in Evangelical Encounters, the Restoration. And so my notification just came through on my phone, so hopefully people will start getting theirs. Of course, most people watch this at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. It says my connection's unstable, so let me know if you're having issues on my end. And I rebooted my thing earlier, so hopefully that won't be an issue. But originally I was going to release an interview with Dr. And some of the issues. Hold on a second here. Okay, I'm sorry. It looks like I'm having a little bit of an internet issue here. If this continues, I might have to pull the plug on this, but hopefully for those of you who are in the chat, can you let me know how good of a signal this is? And also if you can hear me, it appears that it is working. So I was going to have post my interview that I taped yesterday with Dr. Kyle Bashirs about basically anti-Mormonism and an evangelicals pastor's response to it, because a lot of the anti-Mormon rhetoric that's out there actually comes from the evangelical community and could have been maybe one of the motivations for that shooter in Michigan. And so we just want to talk about the consequences of how you say things and, maybe be a little bit more thoughtful in how you have these conversations. So I did earlier. I don't know if any of you saw this, and for some of you, you may not like it, but I was actually on a live stream today with John DeLynn of Mormon Stories, along with a panel discussion. Julie, I believe, is producer, and Nemo the Mormon and myself were the primary people, and there's some guests that popped on. And just to give you a little background on that, 10 minutes before the announcement was made, John and I were texting each other, and John's like, "You want to hop on the live stream?" I'm like, "Sure, let's do it." So I was able to watch the announcement of the new president, prophet, seer, and revelator of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Dallin Oaks. And I also which was pretty much a foregone conclusion. Most people really did expect that that would be the case. But I think a lot of people were really surprised that Christofferson was named onto the first presidency. And it was brought up that Christofferson's very close to his brother, who is gay. And so there's some people, the speculation is that this might be an olive branch to the more progressive wing of the church, to say that we want to welcome LGBTQ people in this. That's maybe, speculation on our part. Also, just put thumbs up on this video so it gets up in front of more people as well. And again, this is an opportunity in the chat to share your thoughts. Again, this is kind of a last minute stream. I pulled my regularly scheduled episodes so that we could talk about today's news, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. I'll share a little bit of mine, and I sometimes wonder, like even when I'm sitting on that panel, Marquita said, Armstrong says, "Hi, Steve. Hope you and Mom have been fine. We're doing good. Thank you for asking." Sometimes I wonder, like, okay, is it my place as an outsider to comment on things happening in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or in the Restoration in general? And I sometimes wonder, like, okay, do people resent that I'm doing that? I think most people are okay with it, but I've gotten a little pushback on that. But then I thought to myself, well, when there's a new pope that's selected, that doesn't stop people throughout the world to give their commentary, to go on news programs and live streams to talk about what their thoughts are on the new pope or speculate on what he's going to be doing. And so I thought, yeah, it's perfectly appropriate for me as an outsider to come on and just give my 2 cents. Now, the machinations of what happens in the first presidency and the Quorum of the 12 is not really my wheelhouse. I mean, I kind of feel like the church should operate any way that it chooses. And, that's how they run things. I'm not a critic of the church. I am a friend of the church, but will be critical at times if I feel like it's appropriate to do and say so. Constructive criticism can be a very good thing across the board, and we can all benefit from it. I'm always getting a lot of hate, but also there's some very constructive criticism that is directed towards me, and I do take it into account. So that's always been my approach with the church. It's just like respect the process. How they conduct business is how they do it. If there are times where I think, hey, maybe you could learn something, experiences maybe from other churches that have dealt with these things, or maybe, good practices, that can be done. I might recommend them, but again, it's not my place to tell the church or any church how to run themselves, but maybe just make observations here and there. So it was surprising that Christofferson was chosen. I wasn't. I was surprised by that, and so I had the opportunity to kind of give my response earlier today on Mormon stories, and I just felt like, okay, let me just talk a little bit about it. I just want to take like a 10-15 minute little thing just to kind of give my thoughts. Um, First of all, the church is at a crossroads. Well, let me just read a couple comments here. Janine says, "You're allowed to comment." Of course. Thanks, Janine. And Scotty says, "Love your way, my friend in Christ." Thank you. Thank you, Scotty. So the church is at a crossroads. Uh, and there's been this tension and conflicts between in even in the Protestant world between the more progressive elements and the evangelical conservatives that eventually led to the essentially becoming two separate movements, and the church being wanting to be a world church, worldwide church, has both progressives and conservatives and people in between, and that tension is there. But I look at the Catholic Church, and they seem to have done a pretty good job to kind of keep all those people under under one tent. And I want to say that the church is trying to do the same thing. I know that the priority right now is trying to keep people under the age of 40 from leaving the church, and so that's one of their priorities. Now, will that change with President Oaks? I don't know, but I definitely think that the church looks at the culture that we're in, how young people view the church and how older people view the church and how their worldviews often don't align with each other. And yet you have a church that's run by very gentlemen that are very, very old, elderly. And I'm not going to poo poo on elderly people because I think elderly people can bring wisdom and maybe thought to, just maybe some wisdom and just a lifetime of knowledge. And maybe that's maybe not the worst way to run a church. Popes often are old themselves. But I think that the church is going to be changing a lot over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. And like I said on Mormon Stories today, I was like, we could very well have a situation where we have like 3 prophets in a 5-year period. So this particular period, and it just dawned on me, 5-year period, it's 2025. And in 5 years will be the 200th anniversary of the church. I just realized that. So we could very well have over the course of the next 5 years, three prophet seers and revelators of the church. And I think this is going to be a very critical time of the church because you're going to see and again, I could be totally wrong. Maybe Oaks outlives us all, and and he's able to. But I tend to think these will be some short-term things that we kind of saw with the Soviet Union in the 80s, where they just seemed like every 6 months there's like a new president of the Politburo or Soviet premier or whatever. And so I kind of have a feeling that the next 5 years are going to look like that. And then just tying all in the 200th anniversary of the founding of the church. Also, of course, keeping into account that the many saints believe that we live in the last days, the latter days. These are the end times. And so there might be significant upheaval in the church. And I think a lot of people are going to watch very closely to see what comes from the brethren and what direction they choose the church. And then to see if we see changes in direction when we have maybe a series of different prophets over a relatively short period of time. Just statistically speaking, that's probably what's going to happen. Of course, God's in control. Marquita says, "We appreciate your bridge building efforts." Thank you, Marquita. And so I just felt like, okay, so I had the opportunity to hop on with John DeLynn and do the panel discussion and kind of give my thoughts on it. And then I went to a friend's house to help them set up something on their TV, ate dinner, took a shower, and hopped on here. So to be honest with you, I'm still processing everything that's happened. Of course, we knew this would happen. We just didn't know when. And when the announcement came down, it was highly okay. I just want to make sure. Okay, I think I lost you for a second there. It was highly scripted and controlled. Just speaking as an observer, okay, and there was no like press conference. There was nothing. It was just that 15-minute little thing. They said their piece and they hopped off. And so I think that was interesting too. I also think that maybe there were a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we'll probably never be made aware of, or maybe a few decades from now, we'll have some journals to read from some of the members of the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency to kind of get an understanding of what happened. Uh, but like I said, church is at a crossroads, and I know I can tell you from my sources that the brethren are divided, um, especially on the LGBTQ issues. And there are some that are more progressive than others, and some that are more conservative. And it is a cause of tension uh, within the Quorum of the 12 and the First Presidency. And I think that tension will continue. I think there's a lot of external pressure that's put on the church as well. And again, I'm just being descriptive, not prescriptive here. Okay, I do think the church will move in different directions on some of these issues, but I also think the church realizes, look, we saw what happened to the community of Christ. We saw what happened to all the mainline Protestants that decided to go a more progressive direction, and what good did that do for them? All those churches are losing members, aging out, and there's no, I mean, 100 years from now, who knows? There will probably be like one mainline Protestant denomination. They'll all have just merged into one church, kind of what you saw in Canada with the United Church. And so I just think that, if they look at the progressive direction, they're like, well, we don't really want to do that. And they look at the evangelicals and they're like, that's been very effective. They're the fastest growing part of Christianity. Evangelicalism, in particular, the charismatic Pentecostal world, are thriving and exploding in growth. So they'll look at that and say, okay, maybe we should go a more traditional conservative direction because that seems to be where the growth is. Now, though, what's happening is in the evangelical world, especially United States, the growth is slowing down and churches are shutting down and some are shrinking. Like the what was still the largest Protestant denomination in America, the Southern Baptist Convention, has lost millions of members. And so they see that too, that maybe that going the more conservative evangelical route at some point might give you short-term gains, but in the long term, will it actually grow the church? So this is the crossroads they're at. This is the crossroads that a lot of churches are at. Is we're in the early 21st century. I think this is going to be a very pivotal time for organized religion, especially in the West. It's kind of scary for a lot of people, but I think that it can also be a good thing. This can be great opportunities for churches to kind of maybe realign and maybe rethink what church is all about and how it can remain relevant in a 21st century context. I think that's why evangelical megachurches are so successful, is they're market based, and people have to compete. And I'm not saying this is necessarily a good thing or a spiritual thing, but I think it speaks to having a competitive marketplace of ideas, which what you have in a lot of the evangelical world. Um, okay, Janine asks, are your sources faithful members of the church? Yes, absolutely. Very faithful. As a matter of fact, that's why my sources know these things, because they're connected on some level to what's going on. And so I'm privy to things. I'm not directly in communication with the brethren, but I have the ability to kind of find out things. And if I wanted to pass a message along, I probably could, but I don't think I'd ever do that unless it was a goodwill gesture. And Janine says, okay, thank you. Yeah. And again, all of my sources, it really doesn't matter. A good source is a good source, no matter where it's coming from. But in this particular instance, my sources tend to be faithful members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it's kind of a collective model, if you will, a collective witness model. In other words, I have a lot of different people who represent different groups within the church that I'm able to kind of figure out certain things and just put together this idea that, some of my sources and kind of say, oh yeah, okay, now I've made that connection and that connection. But then I sometimes hear directly from people who spoke directly to members of the Quorum of the 12 about specific things and relayed them to me. So that happens too. I will, of course, never give my sources, and I won't even, I think it's a real privileged place to be able to kind of get a better understanding of how it operates. Okay, so I've been on for about 15 minutes. We got a few people here. I know this is unusual. I don't typically do live streams on Tuesdays at this time. It's typically Fridays at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. But in lieu of putting out an episode that will probably get lost in all the chatter going on about today's announcement and news, I felt it would be better just to kind of let people know where I'm coming from, and just say that, as if I think of anything else, or if I feel like I need to go do another live stream this week, I will. I would like to get it, whether it's in the chat or in the comments. What are your thoughts about the realignment of the first presidency? Christofferson getting in there um, as a member of the first presidency. What do you think of President Oaks? What are your thoughts on his tenure? What do you think he'll accomplish? Um, are you glad that he was the one that was chosen? Are you glad that Christofferson is in the first presidency, which was kind of a surprise for people? I would like to get your feedback on this as well. So if you want to comment in the video or in the chat or on other social media platforms that I'm on, I would love to hear what you have to say about it as well. Trying to think what else. I might be taping tomorrow with Jacob Hansen, possibly. I'm not sure when I'll be releasing my interview with Dr. Kyle Bashirs, but it'll probably be this Thursday. Okay, so Reed Elred says, I have heard that the proclamation to the family will get added to the canon once all those have cited it has passed away. Have you heard this? Well, Reed, actually, it is interesting. That was part of the conversation that we had today on Mormon Stories, was just that, the proclamation of the family becoming canon. I don't know. I mean, part of me thinks like that they're very reluctant to do much canonizing of stuff. Even the proclamations, even like we haven't had any doctrines and covenants added in a very long time. Um, will it be added to the doctrines and covenants? Will it be just a statement like the priesthood ban and the ban on polygamy? Is that the route they'll go? But then you also had the November policy of 2015, which was at the time was said to be doctrine and revelation, and the church since has renounced it. So I just wonder if um, that will, or maybe not renounced it, they reversed it. And so I don't know. I don't know if the church is wanting to do that. Um, Janine says that would be great if they did. Marquita Armstrong says, on the whole, just happy Bednar didn't make the cut. Okay, that's your opinion, Marquita. Thank you for sharing it. And I think, I've man, I heard a very interesting story that somebody told me about Elder Bednar that was really eye-opening to me. And maybe one day I'll tell the story, because I don't know. I don't know if Elder Bednar is going to be the kind of prophet people think he's going to be. And it was a really interesting insight given to me about the man that kind of made me think that he might, I don't know. I just have this gut feeling about Elder Bednar that it might, his, again, this is just my speculating, but based on this story that somebody told me, and I'll probably one day tell it, I was very impressed by him in a way that I didn't expect to. In I guess in the stereotypical way, the stuff I've heard a lot of negative about him, but this was a positive story that I heard about him from a source that's very close to me, and I thought it was a good story, and I don't know, I'm very conflicted about the whole thing. And again, it, I'm just some outside dude who lives with his mom in his 50-year-old mobile home in Florida. Does it really even matter what I think on these things? I don't know. I'm just giving my opinion. Janine says, okay. Okay. Oh, Sean says Christofferson was a surprise, but it doesn't change the church's overall stance on LGBTQ issues, in my opinion. Oaks is still in charge. Yeah. Yeah. President Oaks is definitely in charge of the church. No doubt about it. And yeah, so we'll see what happens. But I do think it's really important that in a leadership position, again, not telling the church what to do, but to have diversity of thought and have some people that you trust. And it kind of reminds me, even if you don't agree with people, I think one of the best things that ever happened was Abraham Lincoln um, and his team of rivals, where he put a bunch of people in his own cabinet that were rivals of his, and actually he was able to get good. I don't know, he seemed like wise counsel. So maybe just having diversity of thought in the Quorum of 12 and in the first presidency will be helpful to the church. Janine says, I support President Oaks, have been on a very powerful spiritual journey these past years, and the Lord has made it clear who his representative on earth are. So I support them 100%. Okay, coming from a faithful. I'm very curious about the Elder Bednar story. Yeah, maybe one day I'll tell it. It just, to me, it gave me an insight to the man that I hadn't heard before, And I think it's good that, because there's a lot of negative stories out there about Elder Bednar and how he treats people and stuff. And I've heard them, but then I've heard other things that I think also show that maybe a different side of him that maybe people aren't as aware of. And so I don't know. We'll see if we talk about it one day. Well, we're 20 minutes in. Again, just wanted to hop on for a little bit, just to kind of give my two cents here. Probably go back to my regular schedule starting on Thursday. Maybe I'll do another live stream on Friday. I took a little time off. Part of it was a mental health break. I've just been really having troubles lately, and but I feel like we're getting back on track here at MBR. And your thoughts and prayers are greatly appreciated. Okay, folks. Well, hopefully you have a great rest of the week. I'll be doing posting some more interviews, taping some more interviews, going on other programs, I'm sure. I just want to let you know that I do love all of you and care about you. And I do consider it a privileged place to be able to be one of those voices in this space, and try to continue to build bridges in all of our communities, whether it's in the evangelical world to the restoration or it's within the restoration itself. And Janine says, take good care of yourself. We love you. Love you too, Janine. And we do appreciate everybody and their support here at Mormon Book Reviews. Remember, the most important thing is this: all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.